Welcome to the Boxing Gossip channel. Thanks as always for tuning in. If you're new or if you haven't done so before, please take the time to hit subscribe. There's a probability that this will be the last video that I record before Christmas. As a result, I've decided to give you 50% of wallpaper, so you still get your fix of wallpaper, and 50% of Mrs. Gossip's prized Christmas tree. Let me start by saying, before we get onto the boxing, I'd like to wish everyone who supports this channel a very, very happy Christmas. To those who love the channel, to those who tune in occasionally, or to those who absolutely hate the channel but tune in to every video that I do, many, many, many thanks for the support over 2017. I hope you and yours have a fantastic Christmas and are looking forward to boxing in 2018 just as much as I am. You know, the schedule for 2018 already looks absolutely fantastic. You know, I was looking ahead at the schedule for February and March. We are absolutely going to be spoilt as boxing fans. Let's just hope nothing gets in the way of all of these big fights and that they go ahead as is currently planned. In this particular video, I'm looking to discuss Anthony Joshua versus Joseph Parker. A fight that seems very, very, very close to being made and being confirmed for springtime in 2018. Now, normally, I don't do videos like this. Normally, I wait till a fight is confirmed and, you know, then do a video with a reaction to that confirmation. But on this one, like the Dillian Whyte one I did yesterday, I wanted to get it down in advance. Number one, because if it's announced over Christmas, I may not have the opportunity to record a video at the time. And number two, because when you get a fight as potentially big and as interesting as this one, even if it doesn't end up getting made, even if something gets in the way or one of the fighters pulls out, etc., it's still an interesting discussion, and hopefully you guys will still enjoy checking out the content. So that was my logic behind it. Now with this fight, Eddie Hearn has given the indication in several interviews that it is very, very close to getting done. We know the two parties are not miles apart in terms of splits, and you kind of get the impression that this fight is very, very, very close to being confirmed. The fact that Dillian Whyte, Lucas Browne is now being talked up kind of implies that Lucas Browne is no longer holding out hopes for getting the Joseph Parker fight, presumably because Parker and Team Parker are headed towards Anthony Joshua. Now, long-time viewers who've been checking out this channel from 2013, 2014, will know that I've been discussing Anthony Joshua, Joseph Parker as a potential fight for a very, very long period of time indeed. In fact, I think I'm right in saying that when I did my first Anthony Joshua versus Joseph Parker video, it was my highest viewed video on the channel and stayed that way for a long time, like several years actually, because it was a topic that even back then was getting a huge amount of interest, and not just in the UK. You know, obviously Joshua's a sensation in the UK. New Zealand's smaller population, but the Kiwi fans are just as passionate about Joseph Parker, and it was at this time I started getting a few Kiwi subscribers and having a few interactions with those guys on my channel. So ever since, I've kind of been keeping tabs of both guys. Clearly their stocks have both risen astronomically. Clearly they're both guys who are now operating at world title level. Now, in that initial video, I don't know what year it was, 2013, probably more like 2014, 2015, because Joshua hasn't been pro for that long. In that initial video, I looked at both guys, and admittedly, Joseph Parker had had a lot more fights than Anthony Joshua in the pro ranks at the time. And I said, in what was a very close fight that could go either way, I would likely swing to Joseph Parker, and I would likely pick Joseph Parker to win the fight. At the time, I thought Joshua was too untested. I thought Joshua was too stiff, too robotic, and I thought a guy who was as fast, as flowing with his boxing as Joseph Parker could cause Anthony Joshua real problems. A lot's changed since then. Joshua, for a start, has gone on to become the #1 heavyweight in the world, certainly in terms of form. He now holds multiple versions of the world heavyweight title, and he's raised his game to completely new heights. Now, looking back at Anthony Joshua, he is a fighter who has dramatically improved throughout his tenure in the professional ranks. This is a guy putting in performances at a level well above what we could have anticipated when he went pro. he's actually been moved quite quickly in the context of heavyweight boxing. And relatively young in his career, he's taken on names like Vladimir Klitschko, Carlos Takam, Dominic Breazeale, etc. Joseph Parker is another guy who, at a very young age, became a heavyweight champion of the world. He's someone who saw his opportunity there. He had the opportunity to fight for the belt that Tyson Fury was stripped of, the WBO version of the belt. He's taken his opportunity, and he's actually fought a decent level of opposition as well. You know, Joseph Parker, Anthony Joshua, for me, they both fought better opponents than the other world heavyweight champion, Deontay Wilder. Joseph Parker doesn't have that standout superstar name on his resume like Vladimir Klitschko, but what he does have is a consistent, solid level of form. Andy Ruiz, Carlos Takam, Hughie Fury, all very, very, very good names, and names that Joseph Parker deserves an immense amount of credit for getting the victory over. Here's my take on this fight. For me, Joshua and Parker were blue chip prospects. They were about as good a prospects as you'll ever see in boxing. Anthony Joshua is a guy who, for me, has improved his game exponentially as he's moved from prospect to contender to world level to champion and on to elite. Through each level, Joshua's improved. Questions remain about Anthony Joshua, but he's actually answered a lot of the questions in his career today. My big doubt about Anthony Joshua was his chin. People still question his chin, but let's put it this way. AJ does not have a terrible chin. The way AJ took that punch of Vladimir Klitschko that would have knocked down a building, he took that punch, he was badly hurt, but his chin was good enough to allow him to beat the count, to get back up, to stay in the fight, and to recover. Granted, he was in a bad way for a round or two. Granted, you may back a younger fighter to have taken out an injured Anthony Joshua during that fight. But we've got to remain consistent. We've got to give credit where it's due. Joshua took that punch on the chin and was able to come back from it and win the fight. And that's a punch that would have knocked out the vast majority of men. And when I say knocked out, I mean knocked out cold. Unconscious. Joshua may not have a George Foreman chin. Joshua may not have a David Tua chin. But I think we can look at that and say that Joshua also doesn't have a David Price chin. As a minimum, is somewhere in between. You know, AJ is not someone you can blow out with a single punch. At the time, there were a huge amount of rumours about AJ being knocked out in sparring. David Price, Lawrence Okoli, Daniel Dubois. There was a period in time where any heavyweight with any name whatsoever was claiming to have knocked out Anthony Joshua in sparring. And for me, he answered questions in that Klitschko fight. Stamina is still a concern for Anthony Joshua, particularly when he's hurt. He had a tendency to punch himself out. We saw that in the Dillian Whyte fight where he took a body shot from Dillian Whyte and had a round or two off. We saw that in the Klitschko fight where he took a round or two off after being hurt. You know, he's someone who takes a little while to recover, presumably because of how big his frame is. Having said that, in both the Klitschko fight and the Dillian Whyte fights, despite gassing, he found his second wind. He was able to finish both fights by devastating knockout. In addition to that, in the Carlos Takam fight, which was a fight he won every single round in, whilst he was less explosive, whilst he was less instantaneously impressive than the early Anthony Joshua, for me he was also more measured. He'd learned from the painful experience of that Klitschko fight. He didn't want to put himself in a position where he was completely out of energy like he'd done in the Klitschko fight. And for me, as a result, he held himself back. He didn't look for the kill at every moment of that round. He was measured, he was controlled, he was calm, he was considered. He was conscious not to unload his gun. So I think Joshua's improved. I think there are still concerns about Joshua. But I think he cemented himself as the #1 heavyweight in the world in terms of resume and in terms of eye test. I don't think his chin is quite as dodgy as people thought it was on the way up. And I'll include myself in that category. I think he's answered questions about his stamina. He's been able to knock out opponents late in fights. The Klitschko stoppage came in round 11. He's proven his power at the highest level. And I give Joshua a lot of credit for that. Concerns remain. What will he be like? Someone who's able to press him on the inside? Does he have a back foot game? Is he too heavy? Does he have punch resistance to the body? Concerns remain. But so far, we've got to say Joshua's done good. And whilst I'm not going to start hailing him as an all-time great heavyweight, whilst I'm not going to say he takes out the legends of the game, I am going to say that based on what we've seen so far, he deserves to be considered a top heavyweight. Joseph Parker's an interesting one. For me, Parker was the most exciting heavyweight prospect I've seen this decade. You look at Parker coming up, the hand speed, the combinations, the power. He had it all. He had it in spades. When he was facing the journeyman level type opponent, he was answering questions by the bucket load. He was super convincing. A lot of new viewers to this channel think that I don't like Joseph Parker because I think Hughie Fury beat him. What those new viewers are possibly not understanding is that someone could disagree with your opinion, and it may not be a sign of complete bias or hate for a particular fighter. It could just be that they genuinely disagree with their opinion. The longer term viewers will know that I've been covering Joseph Parker for 4 or 5 years and have always rated him, and on the whole have been extremely complimentary about him. One thing I have said, which is something I stand by, is that as Joseph Parker has moved up through the levels, I don't think the improvements in his game have been quite as obvious as the improvements in Joshua's game. Joseph Parker was sold as a massive, massive puncher on the way up through the heavyweight ranks. Now, Parker's clearly a guy who has a level of power. He's a good puncher. But one thing I would say is as he started to fight a higher level of opponents, those knockouts have ceased. There was no knockout or knockdown against Takam. There was no knockout or knockdown against Ruiz. There was no knockout or knockdown against Fury. There was no knockout, I don't even recall a knockdown against Cojanu. Since he's become WBO heavyweight champion of the world, the KOs have ceased. Maybe Parker was a devastating puncher at the level he was at. Or maybe his power just hasn't translated to the top 25, 30 in the world. That happens. It doesn't mean he's a bad puncher. It just maybe means he's not an elite puncher. For me, with Parker, similar to AJ, his weight has increased too much. If you track both of these guys' career weights from their debuts to their more recent fights, it's actually alarming how much weight they put on throughout their professional career. And just like I've mentioned that with AJ in the past, I wonder if that's been somewhat detrimental to Joseph Parker. For a fighter who, for me, could count athleticism, speed, movement as some of their greatest attributes, having to carry that extra weight, 20, 30 pounds, is a huge ask. With Joseph Parker, I've had concerns about his defence from early on. When I was making videos about Joseph Parker, the prospect, taking out journeyman, I used to make comments like, he gets sucked into scraps too much. I remember very early on in his career seeing him badly cut because he negated his boxing and got sucked into straps. I commented that he didn't have head movement. I commented that when he threw punches, he didn't bring his fist back to his chin. He stood there upright with his chin in the air. I commented that when he threw his jab, it was a great jab, but he wouldn't use it effectively. He wouldn't commit to that jab. He wouldn't make it the starting point for all of his offense. He wouldn't double it up. He wouldn't change levels with it. It's frustrating. I've had frustrations with Joseph Parker because I believe some of Parker's development areas are so obvious. You know, if I'm clocking him from my living room at home you'd surely think that the people around him would be clocking him. And I found it frustrating how those weaknesses haven't been ironed out. He's still not using his jab well. He's still not maintaining his defence. And for me, that's been exposed in his more recent fights. Now, he's had the class to get through those fights, and credit goes to him from that. But just like there's been levels that Parker's had to step up through to get from journeyman to contender to world champion, there's another level, and it's the biggest level of all, to go from the level he's currently at to the elite, to the #1. Whoever you think won that Takam fight, and I know the result is controversial, let's agree that Carlos Takam took multiple rounds of Joseph Parker, 4 or 5 as an absolute minimum. Whoever you think won the Ruiz fight, let's agree that Ruiz took multiple rounds off Joseph Parker, 4 or 5 as a minimum. For all it's worth, I thought Joseph Parker won both of those fights, but I understand there was controversy. The Hughie Fury fight was the most controversial of all. As I've already mentioned in this video, I think Hughie Fury won that fight. I know that's controversial, I know people don't like that. But even if you think Joseph Parker won that fight, I'm sure you would agree that Hughie Fury won multiple rounds off Joseph Parker. My point is that as Joseph Parker has stepped up to the level he's been campaigning at, he's been in tough fights. Now that experience of going 12 rounds is vital. Those questions that have been posed to him will help to improve him as a fighter. But my concern is that he's going in against this level of fighters, the Takams and the Ruizes of the world. He's losing multiple rounds to them. And I'm still not seeing that recognition that he needs to make some edits into his game. My worry is that if Joseph Parker continues with not really committing to that jab, continues with the lack of head movement and standing there upright and leaving himself open to being caught when he engages, that really is the worst possible of combinations of things you can do against a guy like Joshua. Joshua is considerably bigger and rangier than Joseph Parker. I believe Joshua is a bigger puncher than Joseph Parker. Whether you agree with that or not, let's agree that Joshua is by far the biggest puncher that Joseph Parker has fought at this stage of his career. Parker's shown an excellent chin so far, but the biggest puncher he's been in with is probably Andy Ruiz. Andy Ruiz, I don't believe to be half the puncher of Anthony Joshua. Joseph Parker may have the greatest chin of all time. It's an unknown. He does not want to be going into that fight eating big right hands from Anthony Joshua with his chin straight up in the air with no head movement, standing completely square. He does not want to throw a jab that comes up short, not have a double jab coming up behind it, and have Anthony Joshua, a fighter who, to his credit, has shown immense timing throughout the course of his career, throwing a right hand over the top as a counter and catching him clean on the chin. These are mega concerns for a guy like Joseph Parker. He also doesn't want to be coming into this fight heavy. If you look at the advantages that Parker could have over Anthony Joshua, you talk about speed, you talk about movement, you talk about combinations. You imagine a big stiff heavyweight like Joshua trudging forward in a flat-footed manner. In many ways, and I know the Kiwi fans are not the biggest fans of Hughie Fury's performance, but in many ways you want Joseph Parker to be doing some of what Hughie Fury was doing. You want to see Joseph Parker up on his toes. You want to see him moving, using the width of the ring. You want to see him giving angles, showing lateral movement, pivoting, switching from side to side. You want Joseph Parker to make those advantages clear. My concern is he's not going to do that. My concern is that Parker's going to come in heavy. My concern is that he's still going to be throwing single punches. My concern is that he's still going to be leaving himself open to getting countered. Can he bring out the best performance for the biggest fight of his career? Theoretically, yes, he can. I'm just worried that those improvements haven't been forthcoming. And I just think that if they were going to have happened, we'd have seen them by now. It's going to be very hard for Joseph Parker to get a decision against Anthony Joshua. The UK, look, you guys know I'm based in the UK. The UK has an increasingly poor reputation for judging. We've had some diabolical judging decisions in the UK, often with the home fighter being favoured. Now, Joshua is the biggest name of all. He has the biggest fan base of all. He has the highest future potential earnings of all. If Joseph Parker comes to the UK and just about nicks a fight like he did against Ruiz, or like his fans believe he did against Fury, you would not be confident of Joseph Parker getting that decision on UK soil. Now, that's not a good thing. I'm not proud of that. I'm not saying, you know, that's something to be celebrated as a UK fan. On the contrary, in fact. But it's something that Team Parker supporters need to be mindful of. If Parker wants a points decision against AJ, he's going to have to win every round. If Parker wants a safe decision, a safe victory against AJ, he's going to have to knock him unconscious. He's going to have to knock him unconscious. And whilst I see that as a possibility, I do see it as a long shot. I believe AJ has been operating at a higher level than Parker. It's not always effective to compare when fighter A and fighter B both fought fighter C, because the oldest phrase in boxing is styles make fights. But compare and contrast those Takam fights. Yes, the Joshua stoppage was controversial, but Takam didn't take a single round off Joshua. In fact, he didn't come close to taking a single round off Joshua. Takam caused Parker major problems. Major problems. And I just believe that whilst Parker has some advantages in this fight, AJ has the bigger advantages. Size, power, home advantage, experience at the top level. If I'm honest, I see this fight, and it's a fight that could go either way. I don't rule Joseph Parker out of this fight. Joseph Parker is a live underdog in this fight, do not get me wrong. But if I'm honest, right now, looking ahead at this fight, I see the most likely ending of this fight being Anthony Joshua remaining undefeated and emerging victorious by knockout. I just don't believe that Joseph Parker has had the kind of fights to prepare him for this test. And I don't think he's put in the kind of performances that give me the confidence to believe he will come through the test. Joshua is not an unbeatable fighter. I don't look at Anthony Joshua and see someone who's going to be talked about in the same breath as Ali and Lennox Lewis in 50 years' time. I don't. I think Joshua is potentially vulnerable. But putting that aside, he is very, very, very good. And I don't think you can go into that Joshua fight, no matter how good you are, if your defence is so static, if you're coming in heavy, if you've got nothing to keep him off you in terms of a jab. And I think Joshua's timing, Joshua's ability to find the right punch at the right time is one of his biggest assets. And that combined with Parker's biggest weakness, which is the lack of head movement, the lack of defence, the vulnerability when he's engaging, I think that's a dangerous cocktail for Joseph Parker fans. Think back to some of those punches that Joshua's landed in his career. Remember that counter on Charles Martin. Remember that uppercut on Vladimir Klitschko. I think those type of punches, timed to perfection, chosen to perfection, are exactly the kind of punches he's going to be able to find a home for against Joseph Parker. And whilst I think Parker is talented, spirited, I think he's got a lot of heart, and I think he's got a lot of chin. I don't think chin alone keeps you in a fight if you're taking punches like that. And I think he will be. My early thoughts is that Anthony Joshua wins the fight by stoppage. It's a great fight. It's a fight that I'm looking forward to. And it's a fight that I'm not completely confident in. You put a gun to my head, I'm saying Joshua by stoppage. But I'm not telling you that's a 90% chance. I'm not telling you that's an 80% chance. I'm not telling you it's a 70% chance. Parker's got things he could do in this fight. But he needs to improve. He needs to raise his form to a whole nother level to what it's been before. He needs to sharpen up and smarten up technically and tactically. Can he do that? It's an open question. Let me know your thoughts. Leave your comments in the section below. I really do hope you guys are as excited and as pumped for this fight and for the 2018 boxing schedule as I am. If you've enjoyed this content, please hit the thumbs up button. Please press subscribe. I've had a lot of new subscribers jump on in the last week or two. I'm grateful for that, and let's continue that momentum by getting some new subscribers on. 2018 is going to be a great year for boxing. The fights we've been discussing on the channel in the last couple of days, Wilder Ortiz, Dillian Whyte, Lucas Browne, AJ Parker, the return of Danny Garcia, Selby Warrington, Frampton Donaire, you've got Eubanks and Groves, you've got the World Boxing Super Series semi-finals, Errol Spence returning. You know, this is all springtime 2018. Exciting, exciting, exciting stuff. I will be back, guys. This is probably my last video till Christmas, but who knows? Who knows? I might get a bit bored. We'll get some content up between Christmas and New Year, certainly. Once again, thank you to those who've supported the channel. Thank you to those who view, to everyone who's subscribed, to everyone who hits the thumbs up on the videos. And I really do hope you guys have a great Christmas and get to spend some good times with your loved ones. Other than that, thanks for tuning in as always. I appreciate the interest. I'm out, guys. Cheers.